Swallows and Amazons by Arthur Ransome. Read by Alex Jennings. Chapter 19. The Amazon River. The sun set behind the hills on the western shore of the lake. The belt of light along the tops of the hills on the eastern side narrowed and at last was gone. The wind dropped. The islands off Rio were reflected in still water. "This will never do," said Captain John. "It may be dark before the wind comes again. We better slip across to the western shore and row along it. Even if they are watching, they won't see us now if we keep close to the land." "They'll take us for a fisherman," said Susan. "Except for the mast," said John. "But we can take it down. Anyhow, we shall be sheltered nearly all the way if we come along that side of the lake. I bet they won't see us at all. And if the wind doesn't come again, we shall be too late to see things by the time we get into the river." "Come on," said Susan. "May I row?" said the boy Roger. It had been a long wait among the islands, and they were all glad to be moving again at last. In the morning the fair wind had brought them fast from Wildcat Island down to Rio Bay. They had cruised in and out among the islands, and made sure that the Amazons were not lurking among them, waiting for their chance to capture the island once again. They had made sure that the Amazon was still in the Amazon River, so that the plan was working out just as they had hoped, and they will be able to sail in and capture her in the evening. They had anchored close under one of the islands north of Rio to wait till dusk. From there they had been able to look out over the northern part of the lake, without being seen themselves, and all day long they had kept a close watch on the promontory behind which, they knew, lay the Amazon River and the stronghold of the Amazon pirates. But the afternoon had been very long, and at one time there had almost been a mutiny. "Let's go straight on," Roger had said, and Susan had said, "Why not?" Captain John had brought them to reason. Everything had been planned for an attack at dusk. There would be no chance at all of capturing the Amazon if they sailed up there in broad daylight. Besides, they had left able seaman Titty behind on Wildcat Island to look after the lights for them so that they could come home in the dark. They could not leave Titty behind and then go and turn the day into an ordinary picnic. Susan had agreed. Roger had suggested swimming instead. The mutiny had thus been suppressed without bloodshed, as they say in the books. The crew had been rewarded by getting permission from their captain to go ashore. They had landed on the island near which they were anchored. They had bathed from it and made a fire on the shore, not for cooking, because they had brought no kettle, but because landing on an island without making a fire is waste of an island. They had drunk half their milk and eaten half their rations. Then, while John stayed on the island, he had sent the mate and the boy to sail into Rio to buy stores. They had bought a shilling's worth of the sort of chocolate that has almonds and raisins in it as well as the chocolate, and so is 3 sorts of food at once. They had come back. They had visited several other islands, and had an unpleasant meeting with some natives on one of them, who pointed to a notice board and said that the island was private and that no landing was allowed. Only once Captain John had thought he had seen one of the Amazons moving in the heather on the promontory, but he could not be sure without the telescope. It might have been a sheep. The wait all through the afternoon and early evening had been long and tiring, and though there had been plenty to look at in the steamers and motorboats and rowing skiffs of the natives, they had seen no sails except those of large yachts far away up the lake. For the first time in their lives, all 3 of them had wished to hurry the sinking sun upon its way. Now, at last, the sun had set. Twilight was coming on. There was no wind, for the wind had gone with the sun, as it so often does, and they were beginning to be afraid that the dark would come too soon for them. All was astir in the Swallow. The mast was unstepped and laid on the thwart so that it stuck out over the bows. There was room for it in the ship, for it was a few inches shorter than Swallow was long, but to stow it all inside, it had to lie straight down the middle, so that it was very uncomfortable for anybody who was rowing. "Anyway, why shouldn't she have a bowsprit?" said John. "Besides, it's only for a short time." Roger rowed. John was looking at the chart in the guidebook. Susan steered. "Pull with your back," she said. "Don't bend your arms till the end of the stroke." "I'm pulling with all of me," said Roger, "but I've got too many clothes on." "He's making a fair lot of noise and splash," said the captain. "He'll be tired before we get near enough for it to matter," said the mate. "No, I won't," said Roger. Slowly they moved across to the western shore. No one could row Swallow fast. It was growing dusk. Already the hills were dark, and you could not see the woods on them. It began to seem that after waiting so long because it was too light, they were going to fail after all because it would not be light enough. "Look here, Susan," said John. "I think I'd better row." But just then a line of ripples crept over the green and silver surface of the smooth water. "Thank goodness," said Captain John. "Here's the wind again, and it's the same wind. Sometimes it changes after sunset, but this is still from the south." The ripples grew as the south wind strengthened. "It'll be against us on the way home," said the mate. "Well, there'll be no hurry then," said John. "What about sailing?" said Roger. "But I'm not tired." "It isn't as if Swallow had a white sail," said Captain John. "They'll never see the brown one in this light, especially if we hug the shore. And we can with this wind. Yes, Mr. Mate. Tell the men to bring the sweeps aboard." "Easy," said the mate. "Bring the sweeps in." Roger stopped rowing and lifted first one oar and then the other from the rowlocks and laid them quietly down. "Keep her heading as she is," said Captain John. "As she is, sir," said the mate. In a calm, things go any way in a sailing ship, but a little wind sharpens them up at once. John stepped the mast as quietly as he could. He hooked the yard to the traveller and set the sail. There was a little west in the wind, and the boom swung out on the starboard side. "She's moving now like anything," said the boy. "I don't want to get there too soon," said John, "but I do want to get into the river while it's still light enough to see, but late enough for the pirates to be off their guard and feasting in their stronghold." "Peggy said they had supper at 7:30, said Susan. "Well, it's ages after that now," said John. "I should think we were all right." Here and there on the shores of the lake, lights twinkled in the houses of the natives. Astern of them, over the tops of the islands, there was a huge cluster of lights in Rio Bay. But it was not quite dark yet, though the first stars were showing. Swallow was sailing fast, and in a very little time they were abreast of the promontory, and could see its great dark lump close to them. "We must lower sail now," said the captain. He lowered the sail himself. He could not trust even Susan to lower it without making a noise. Then he wetted the rowlocks so that they would not squeak. The Swallow drifted on past the point. Beyond the promontory was a wide bay with deep beds of rushes on either side of it. Somewhere at the head of the bay was a house with lights in its windows. The lights, reflected in the water, showed exactly where was the opening of the river mouth between the reeds. A moment later they lost sight of the reflections and knew that they had drifted too far. "Now, Mr. Mate," whispered John, "will you row as quietly as ever you can? Roger goes forward to keep a lookout. Don't shout if you see anything. Just tell the mate under your breath." "What about the mast?" asked the mate. "If they're watching, they'll see the ship and know her anyhow," said Captain John. "If they're not watching, the mast doesn't matter. If they are in the house in those lighted rooms, they won't be able to see anything at all out here. I'm sure we've done them, if we can find the boathouse. They'd have challenged us long before this if they'd seen us." The mate rowed with slow, steady strokes. Her oars made no noise at all. They slipped in and out of the water without a splash. Swallow was in smooth water now, sheltered by the high ground of the promontory. John steered till he could see the lights of the house reflected in the river. That was the opening in the reeds. He steered towards it. Presently there were tall reeds on either side of them. They were in the Amazon River. "The boathouse is somewhere on the right bank," whispered John. "That's our left. Tell Roger to keep a lookout to port." Suddenly there was a splash in the reed beds, followed by a loud quack. "What's that?" said Susan, startled. "Duck," said the captain. Susan rowed on. There was a whisper from the lookout. "There it is. I see it." "Where?" whispered the mate, looking over her shoulder. "There," said the boy. High above the reeds, not far ahead of them, on the right bank of the river, rose the black square shape of a large building. "That's it," whispered the captain. "The boathouse," said the mate. "Quiet. Shh." The boathouse stood deep in an inlet among the reeds. Captain John steered towards it. "Easy all," he whispered. There was a dead silence on the river as the Swallow drifted on. There was a noise of music in the house with the lights in it. "Captain Nancy said the boathouse had a skull and crossbones on it," whispered Captain John. I see it, cried Roger. Shut up, be quiet, hissed the mate. That's it, all right, whispered Captain John. On the front of the big open boathouse, high up over the entrance, cut out of wood and painted staring white, were a huge skull and crossbones, big enough to have belonged to an elephant. Can you see in? Asked Captain John. There's a big boat in there, said Roger. They said there would be. That'll be the launch that belongs to the natives. Will our mast clear that beam? Gently now, gently. Swallow slid into the big dark boathouse as Susan brought her oars in. There's a rowing boat, whispered Roger loudly. Look out, don't bump the launch, whispered Susan. There's nothing else, said Roger. The Amazon isn't here. John was standing in the stern of the Swallow, holding onto the gunwale of the launch. He pulled out his pocket torch. They won't be able to see the light from the house, he said, and pressed down the button. The bright light wavered round the boathouse. It showed a rowing skiff and the big launch, and an empty space on the further side. It was clear that a boat was usually moored there. Pinned to the wooden stage that ran along that wall of the boathouse, there was a big envelope, white in the light of the torch. Captain John pushed at the launch, and Swallow moved across towards the wall. Roger grabbed the envelope. Give it to me, said the mate, and the boy obediently gave it. The captain and the mate examined the envelope by the light of the torch. There was a skull and crossbones on it, done in red pencil. Under that, in blue pencil, was written, To the Swallows. John tore the envelope open. Inside, there was a sheet of paper with another skull and crossbones done in blue. Under them, in red, were the words, Ha Ha, written very large, and under them were the words, The Amazon Pirates, and two names, Nancy Blackett Captain and Peggy Blackett Mate, also written in red. Captain John thought for a moment. It's quite simple, he said. They've hidden her up the river. It's an old pirate trick. We know they haven't put to sea, for we've been watching all day. Come on. He shut off the torch. They pushed out. Out of doors it seemed quite light after the darkness of the big boathouse. Now, Mr. Mate, lay to your oars, said Captain John. There's still light enough to find her if we're quick. Mate Susan bent to her oars, and Swallow moved fast up the river. John, staring as hard as he could into the dusk, kept her clear of the reeds. In another minute, they were round a bend in the river. Again there was a splash in the deep reed beds at the river's mouth. Again a duck quacked loudly. It quacked 2 or 3 times, until a voice said sternly, Stow it, you goat! Don't overdo things! The nose of a boat pushed its way out from among the reeds. Just above the nose of the boat was the head of Captain Nancy Blackett. She watched for a moment and listened. All clear, she said. They've gone upriver. That'll give us a bit more start. Come on. There was more splashing in the reeds as Peggy Blackett poled over the stern. The boat came out of the reeds into the mouth of the river and drifted out towards the lake. Captain Nancy took the oars. She rowed hard for a minute or two. Safe enough now, she said. I'm going to step the mast. Lucky we thought of taking it down, or they'd have seen it over the reeds. Hang on to the main sheet, you son of a sea cook, she said with great good temper and satisfaction. She hoisted the sail. Now then, my hearties, she said as she clambered aft. Wildcat Island and Amazons forever. We've done them fairly brown.